months down the road from there, it wasn't too many months down the road from that point when I collapsed in the office that I found myself, thank you, Fly, joining in the conversation, that I found myself trying to not be here. And that culminated in me taking lots of ridiculous risks to try and escape life, and a car accident that left me with a broken back in 3 places. I still didn't recognize that as burnout, though. I still didn't recognize that as needing to slow down. I just felt desperately depressed, desperately lost, and desperately knackered. Kept going, kept going, kept going. Goal set, goal set, goal set. It wasn't really until we hit 2006 when my goal setting had continued. I'd got out of the abusive relationship I was in. I'd moved to a different part of the country. And again, similar to Kelly's career path, I was at the top of my game, probably too young, but I was crashing. Nobody knew I was crashing. I hid it very, very well. I went into robot mode. Interesting, I said we. I went into robot mode and I just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. It took a series of really life-changing incidents that shook my world for me to change things. It took my uncle dying, all in the space of 8 weeks, my uncle dying, my dad dying, my partner, now wife, being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and then being made redundant. My financial future, as I had always believed it to do, being ripped out from underneath me like that. Being the only child, having to try and organise the funeral. And again, the common theme, struggling with my sexuality, because a lot of my family members wanted me to keep my relationship with my now wife hidden and would invent boyfriends for us and stuff like that. And at the end of that period, and a break into the family home, I'll just throw that one out there. At the end of that period, when I found myself rocking and hiding and trying to, crying and trying to just keep hiding under the family dining room table, I recognized that something had to give and it couldn't keep being me. Now I can look back and recognize now that over a 4-year curve from that point, I worked through a burnout and or a breakdown. I absolutely unraveled, but I still managed to hide it from everyone else. And I think this is one of the themes with particularly women when we're facing burnout, when we're trying to do too much, when we're trying to keep all those plates spinning and just prove that we can. Sometimes we don't spot the signs, sometimes we ignore the signs, and some of us are crying out for someone to just notice that we are about to break. But unfortunately, because so many of us wear those masks, people don't notice, and we do break. And for some of us, that can turn into all kinds of awful things. It can turn into chronic illness. It can turn into hospitalization. It can turn into long-term health problems. Certainly with mine, I ended up with chest infection after chest infection after chest infection while I was still working, to the point where I damaged my lungs. And one of my lungs to this day only works at a third of capacity, because I kept going, because I ignored the signs, because I thought that's what we were supposed to do to make it in a patriarchal society. So I want to really, really applaud Kelly for the strides that she is taking to educate us all on burnout. And I know she predominantly aims her message towards women, and I think that's absolutely bang on. But I think there are a lot of guys out there with burnout too. And even if we're looking at it from the point of view of women burning themselves out, the work that Kelly is doing, the messages that she's putting out there, and the flack that's drawing for her is at the very least opening some of those patriarchal eyes, as well as the eyes of so many women who didn't realize there was an alternative. She's changing worlds, she's opening eyes, and she is leading us. I genuinely believe Kelly is one of few genuine world changers in our midst. There are a handful of people I can name, many of whom I work with, I'm so blessed for that, who are going to make a big difference in this world, and Kelly is already doing it. She's going to help to open the eyes of the patriarchy, to show them what they're doing to us, oblique for us. More importantly, she's going to help women to break the chain. An eagle needs 2 wings to fly. It's not about men being better than women, women being better than men, but it is about us all, however we identify, wherever on the gender or sexuality spectrum. It's about us all sitting up taking notice and recognizing that something has to change. And this is the beginning. So Kelly, thank you. I salute you. I applaud you. Please don't ever shut up. Please keep doing more of the same. Everybody here, please keep giving Kelly your encouragement, because she's going to be drawing shade for this stuff, and we're going to need to be the army behind her. And I know I'm there for as long as it takes. Kelly, thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm not going to say too much more. I'm just going to say thank you. I'm going to pop open my bubbles. I've got myself some pink bubbles to say,
Yay.
Well done to my little bit. Non-alcoholic ones, everybody. I don't know if they're going to explode, but I'm going to do this. And then Laura's going to ask me lots of questions. But no, thank you. And I think, I suppose the point that I kind of draw on the most, Taz will know. Taz and I have had a few conversations about this, really. And I don't know for the rest of you whether you're self-employed or in corporate. I think whenever I do talk about this stuff, and whenever I tend to kind of focus on the women and all of that sort of stuff, I get like all of the shade, the awful comments, the negativity, the "you're shit, you don't know what you're talking about, where's your data, where's your stats, you're the worst thing ever, blah 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 blah." I get all of that in my DMs, right? Taz gets a lot of it on her feed, so kind of everybody gets to see the bottom feeders that are all over Taz. But I get them a lot, all hidden in my DMs, and I think what I've learned from that is, yes, there absolutely needs to be more change. I can choose whether I just delete them and block them and kind of do whatever, but I think it is a sign that a lot of the hidden stuff that all of us deal with is absolutely still going on, right? A lot of this stuff, particularly when it comes to burnout, is still taking place behind the scenes. And I think when we look at some of the toxic workplaces and some of the things that we are all fighting for within the workplace, a lot of that still remains hidden. And whilst I still stand by the fact that I will never kind of name shame, I don't share those messages, I don't name shame, but I will continue to talk about them and say this stuff is still happening, because for me, it's the behind the scenes stuff that can be the most toxic and can contribute to burnout and everything else that so many of us are going for. So yeah, thank you. On that note, I'm going to pop my bottle and shut up and hand over to Laura. Thank you, Taz.
You're welcome.
Thank you all of you for being here.
Well, congratulations, Kelly. So we're popping champagne to her book. It's only lunchtime here in New York, so I will not start my drinking just yet. But I finished this book in 24 hours because it arrived a little bit late to New York because of shipping issues. And I told Kelly this morning, I flagged, 20 pages that really gave me an aha moment. We're not going to get to all of them today, but we can hopefully talk about a few. And I think Taz said a few things that I want to try and make time to circle back on too, because I think we just all have so much to learn from each other. And like, before we kind of dig into the meat of the work, which is always how my conversations with Kelly go, Kelly, just let us know why you wrote this book, because I know you have so many books in your brain at all times, and there's a lot of personal things you've shared, and I think of you as always very vulnerable, but I think this is probably your most vulnerable. So tell us, really why this was the right time to do it.
I think it kind of felt like I didn't have a choice, really, when it came to it. So I think the name for the book and the idea for the book came first of all in 2019. And I knew what it needed to be, but I also knew I couldn't write half the story. I couldn't tell half the story and not the other half. And I think because of that, I think I was probably, 4 or 5 chapters in. And for those of you that have read it, there's not a particular time frame to it. It's just lots of kind of thoughts in random orders that I was kind of writing them as they came. But I ignored it in 2019. 2020 was kind of like the perfect opportunity to sit and write something. I didn't have a huge amount of downtime, but I did have some, but kept coming up with more and more and more ideas for different books. And I can remember, actually, it was the day that We Can Do Hard Things by Glennon Doyle arrived through my door. And I was like, I couldn't open it. I think I just found out my India trip had cancelled. Like we were finding out the world was going to close. And like We Can Do Hard Things arrived on my, and I was like, oh, like I've got a free day today. I'm going to sit and I'm going to read this book. But I can't remember what the name of it was. No, but I was like, I had to write something before I did it. And so I started, which was basically, excuse the language, everybody, but it was basically like, what the fuck are you waiting for? Right? It was this, and it was the start of another book. Like, how often do we keep waiting for opportunities? How often do we keep waiting for this and keep waiting for this? And I was like, this is the book that I'm going to write. And then kind of got blocked by it because this one was like, this has got to come first. And ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. And it should have been out in 2021. And I was like, I don't want to write that book. So started like 3 different ones and was like, these are the ones that I want to write. And it was like, this was the one that had to happen. And I think then when I knew that I had my power up event, which some of the lovely people on the call were there for, but I think I knew when I had that, it was like, okay, that felt like the deadline, right? I want to be able to give that to people on the day. That felt like the deadline. Just do it, because like you can't, it just felt like this was the blocker to everything else that needed to come. And I still don't know if that's drawing a line in the sand or starting something else off or making it bigger. I don't know what it is, but it was just, this is the one that I had to do first. And I think Taz and Rupinder, actually, who I think is also just joined, I sent the draft copy of this to the editor to get done on the Wednesday. And by the weekend, I'd mapped out the whole of the next book that's coming. And I've then started to write that. But I couldn't have done that without getting this one out of my head. So for whatever reason, I don't know necessarily it was choice, but there was definitely if you do not do this one, like nothing else is coming. And I know, Laura, you and I have talked about Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic. And I know, Michelle, I recommended that to you a couple of weeks ago as well. But like Big Magic is basically like Liz Gilbert believes that like we don't have ideas find us, but we have to be doing something with them. And maybe at some point I thought if I didn't do anything with this one, it would just bugger off and let me get on with the stuff that I really wanted to do. But it has hounded me. And so for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's because of the messages that I'm getting, you know, I've included in the book and I've included on the website for the book, the note from the editor. Maybe it was her I needed to help, I don't know. But I just knew that I needed to get it out so that I could either move on or move forward with something else.
Yeah, I love your, you know, it's the buzzword of the day, but bias to action. But really, you have an amazing ability when you see something that needs to be done to do it and to just be brave and bold. And I think that's really like a lot of what I got out of the book too, is that you need that kind of agency and accountability, especially as women, as Taz said, just to feel like we can take up space and that your voice needs to be heard. I feel like if I ask 100 women if they would write a book, 99 are like, no, what do I have to say? I don't have much wisdom to share. And so I admire your boldness just to know that your story can take up lots of space for us and hopefully to inspire us to do it too.
Thank you.
So I was curious of really what you were hoping to achieve. And if we were kind of thinking boldly around changing the world of work, changing lives of women, all of the work that you do around empowering us. And what are you hoping that your readers are going to kind of feel after this or get from the book?
Oh, good question. I don't know. It's probably the first answer. I think as I kind of think, and for a lot of the messages that I've been getting, so the people that bought it on like pre-order and the people that have had it kind of before today, I think a lot of the messages that I'm getting from them are people that are at burnout. So I'm at burnout and I'm getting so many messages like this really resonates. Like, this is me, this is where I'm at. I've had messages over the last couple of weeks for like people that have literally like ended up in hospital. I've had messages from a woman that had a stroke. You know, she's like, I've been following you for years. I never thought it would happen to me. I'm now in hospital. I've been following you for years. I never thought it would happen to me. I've ended up having a stroke. You know, I'm getting all of those sorts of things. And so I suppose for those that are at the stage of burnout, I suppose maybe there's something about letting them see that there is a way out of it. Like there is something at the end of it. You will come out of it. It's not going to be kicking your ass forever. And you have to make a change in order to come out of that successfully. But I think the biggest thing for me, and I spoke about this on a panel last week, I've spoken to 3 or 4 people about it today. The biggest thing for me is that I want people to know that we can prevent burnout. Like we don't have to get to the point of burnout to then say, I want to be living my best self, or I want to be telling my truth, or I want to be confident, or I want to do that. I want us to get to the point where we do not get to burnout. And I don't know if this is the first stage of that story or not, but I want everybody to know that like we do not have to get to the point of burnout before we start to say, do you know what, I am enough, my voice does matter, I can do all of this great stuff that I wanted to do. So I suppose for those that are in it, I want them to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I love that.
And for those that aren't, I want them to see that you can make the changes before you get to that point. And if you're seeing the signs, like don't ignore them.
Yeah. I love also, Taz said something at the start of the call that's like just reverberating for me, which is like, and I don't even know if she meant to say it as a powerful thing, but the idea of helping each other see the signs. Because I think, especially in business, it's like we don't really help each other out on this front because we still wear the badge of I'm so busy. Are you so busy? You must be so busy. I'm so glad you're so busy, right? Nobody says like, you're so peaceful. You're so calm. You seem so grounded. How are you achieving that? How have you found time for yoga? Like I don't know, maybe this is a New York, England thing, but if any of you work in environments like that, tell me. I think we have to make a concerted effort to help each other. And so I love this idea of us, and probably to your point, Taz, helping men do it for women and vice versa, and for everybody to kind of not just look at it like, it's something I have to catch for myself, but also really looking at it collectively. Cause I feel like I have friends who I see working into the ground, and I feel a certain responsibility to be able to say to them, like, this isn't healthy for you. Where can you set a boundary? How can I help you? Do you want me to show you an email I've had friends send me. I've had you, Kelly, say, how would you respond to this? How would you set the boundary? I'd love to learn from you. And I think that's really progressive. Like, I feel like if we can actually look at it that way, it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I want to see more of that. I think again, there were a couple of things last week actually. So I was on this panel on Wednesday. So it was a panel talking about burnout, and one of the words, I've never said it as blatantly as she did. I think I've written a few articles about it, but I was like, my new strapline, right? Lazy bastards don't get burnout. And I was like, that's so true. That is so true. And I really like, I've been kinder about that in some of the things that I've written, but she was just like, lazy bastards don't burn out. Right. It really is as simple as that. But I then think I started talking. So Denise Duffield Thomas, I got to interview her for the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And like she, in all of her books, like we'll talk about the fact that she is a lazy perfectionist, right? She wants perfectionism and she's really lazy. So she's looking for all of the shortcuts. The laziness in her is not getting her to the point of burnout, but the perfectionist in her is. And she recognizes that whenever the perfectionist starts to take over, that's where she goes into burnout. I think your point about the US, then I put an article out last week, which I think was basically, HR, what the fuck are you trying to prove? And everyone like, this is so me, I relate to this is absolutely true, we need to change this, we need to change this. And then there was a woman from the US who shared my post, and she had done like this, like tagged me in it, Kelly Swingler, let me make this really clear and simple for you. And then this kind of barrage of all of the things that like HR are doing, how dare I berate them, and how dare I not know what's going on in the US with all of this stuff, and how dare I do this. But she focused a lot on all of the vacation time and how vacation time in the US, right, because the government don't support it, this is an issue. And so if the government don't support it, leaders are not going to be supporting it. And she just kept going on and on and on about vacation. my points were like, there's loads, I've worked for some of them. There are loads of companies, they don't wait for the government to say, this is how you look after your people. The leaders that give a shit about the people are giving them everything that they need, be it vacation, paternity leave, maternity leave, pay, whatever it is, right? But also my big point to her was that it's not necessarily just about the time out that you take. Sometimes it is about the environment that you're in. It's about your boundaries. It's about your mindset. It's all of these things. It's not just about vacation. Because again, if it were just about vacation, even all of us that take our holiday, we'd never get to the point of, like I was taking my leave, and I needed to in a lot of cases because I was working around, kids' school holidays and all of those sort of things. I was taking the time out regularly. It wasn't the lack of holiday that got me to the point of burnout. It was everything else that was around it.
Yeah.
And I think also on that point of perfectionism and that kind of like the lazy bastards thing. But I was listening to, I've drafted an article that I'm going to put out tomorrow, but in the process of it, I also got to the point of this perfection. And again, Laura, you and I have spoken about her a lot, but like with Brené Brown, when she talks about it, right? Perfectionism is basically masking shame, right? We become perfectionists because we want to mask the shame. And that shame comes from, what will other people think of me? It's not what do I think of me, or am I working hard enough? But it's if I don't do this, or if I do this, or if I don't work hard enough, or if I do all of this stuff, what are other people going to think of me? And so I think those of us that are high performers, high achievers, perfectionists, and all of those sorts of things, there is something deeply rooted in us that says, I've got to keep pushing to prove that I am good enough. But I think the crux of it comes down to that feeling of shame and what will everybody else think of me if I ask for help, if I admit I've burnt out, if I take the leave, if I do this, if I do that, if I do that. That seems to be one of the biggest driving factors. And again, that's the stuff that I want to say we can prevent. Like we can prevent all of that from happening. We do not have to wait until we get to that point of burnout. So I think if we could do all of those things collectively, then I think we start to see the shift.
Yeah, I think there's just so many actionable things we can do collectively that we somehow forget in the day-to-day to help each other find peace and balance.
Yeah,
and not glorify the busy. So when someone says, I've been swamped, it's been crazed, I've been insane, I'm cranking the workout, I'm grinding the workout. One of my friends brought that to my attention. She's like, these words are so violent, they're so physical, they're so aggressive. And I'm like, gosh, it's true. And now when I catch them, I'll say to a friend or whoever's saying it, like, do you want to be in that zone? If you do, if it truly is your way of working, by all means, as you say, not everyone's going to reach that exhaustion. But if we know people who are going to potentially deplete themselves because of that behavior, I think we have a collective responsibility to acknowledge it and say, what can we do? How can I help you?
Yeah, and you're right that, there is like busy seems to be a badge of honor. And I think the more that we talk about burnout, I think I mentioned to you a few months ago, like there was this whole campaign on Twitter, right? Send me your gifts of what burnout looks like. And I was like, this is not funny, people.
Right.
Like, this is not a funny topic to be having a conversation about. And actually what the majority of talking about is not burnout. That is not burnout. And so those sorts of things really get to me, but I still, it is now, busy, stressed, overworked, burnt out. It's like, oh yeah, badge of honor, like high five. Yeah, me too. And then everybody goes into that comparison mode. And again, when would it have been? 2015, 2016, I was approached by my friend's editor at the time, actually, to write a book on what's your excuse for not overcoming stress. And there was a business coach that she and I had been kind of meeting at when I did go networking for like 3 months. But, and she and I had gone for coffee one day, and I was talking to her about this book. And then we met a couple of months later. I'm like, oh, it's done and it's finished. And I still to this day remember her response being, your business cannot be successful if you have found the time to write a book. So either you're lying about the fact that you've written the book, or you're lying about your business success. And I thought, well, I've never spoken to you about my business success, actually. We've just this is just kind of an open conversation. But I will never ever forget that conversation. Like, you cannot have a successful business and have time to write a book. So you must be lying about one or the other of them. And I was like, actually, I can have a successful business and I can have time to write a book. And I'm going to continue writing them. And I'm going to continue to grow to grow a successful business without exhausting myself and knackering myself and doing all of that other crap along the way. I do not need to be, I mean, I am still a kind of recovering overperformer. But I think a lot of that is ingrained in me. Some of that is still there from corporate, but I'm able to, as much as possible, to create the balance that I want. And actually success for me now is more about the balance and the value that I'm able to add.
Yeah, it's so important to define success for yourself, not the way that everyone else defines it, because it could very much be that someone sees success as solely money and it has to be this amount and this, blah, 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 these goals. And for other people, it's having an amazing day-to-day life of walking and yoga and resting and cooking. And I think the beauty of this book is the idea of not judging what works. Like, it's not, you've repeated in enough ways where my brain really comprehended it, that it's not one size fits all. We are all wired differently. Somebody might need a 4-day work week. Somebody might want to work 60 hours and then have a month off. And that's the beauty of, I think, what you're trying to convey, or what I think people will take from it, is this idea of flexibility. Truly modern workplaces to say what works for Kelly may not work for Laura, what works for Laura may not work for Deborah. Like, just what do you individually need and how can I help you identify what you need and what you value? I think that's the future, or hopefully.
So let's hope so.
We should be here. The other part that I really took from this towards the end is like kind of philosophical, so I don't exactly know how to mention it, but I'll just let my brain roll here. The idea that we can either blame external stuff, society, patriarchy, our CEOs, the systems, the patterns, the whatever, well, that's why I'm overworked. That's why I'm overstressed. Just kind of blame them. Or the self-deprecation of I must be so bad at managing my time. I must be so bad at saying no. I must not be able to set any boundaries. And so it's neither of those. There's some balance in the middle, I guess, that the pendulum kind of needs to sort of stay here of let's acknowledge it's both, not either or. It's like an end to me. There's stuff we can do individually and stuff we can do systemically to improve.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, I think that comes back to Taz's point in the beginning. I think it's a collective thing. Yeah. Right. At the time, I thought I had burned out because I was the failure, right? There was something that I had done wrong. Clearly, I wasn't ready for that environment. I wasn't ready for that role. I hadn't done all of the stuff that I needed to do. I didn't fit in corporate. I didn't fit at that level. I didn't do, so there was a lot of blame. And I think as I started to come out of that, and again, do the training and stuff that I'd done around the neuroscience and the psychotherapy and all of the other kind of understandings about how our brain works. And then I wanted to understand more about, physical energy within us and emotional energy within us, and start to kind of explore all of those layers. And I think when I started to do that and get out of my own head, there was a part of me where I definitely, and I suppose part of, I don't know whether we kind of want to look at it in terms of the grief curve or change curve or whatever, but I then got to a point where I was really angry, really angry. And everything then was about the organization, right? It was all of the blame was on their door. They had done this to me and they had done this to me and they had done this to me. And how dare they do this and how dare they do that? So then I'd put everything onto them. And I think as I continue to kind of heal and allow that space and to really look at everything, it was collective. Yeah. I didn't do enough to protect my boundaries. I didn't do enough to say, this is where I'm at. I had started to, and again, I kind of talk about this everywhere and including in the book, I had really started to step away from who I am at the core. I'd stopped trusting my intuition. I had tried to fit into this toxic environment because I thought that's how I would make the difference. So I wasn't even really speaking or managing or leading in the way that I knew was for me. And I'd stopped all of that. From an organization perspective, they were doing nothing about the culture. They were doing nothing about the toxic leadership. They were doing nothing about the 10,000 projects that they were, trying to get me in on, but they weren't listening to the fundamental big issues that this big consultancy that they were working with were causing. They were not doing what was right for the people. There were so many things that they weren't doing, But I definitely came to see that actually we were both to play. We both played a part in that. None of us were shifting, none of us were changing. And even after my burnout and after I'd kind of had these operations and I went back to work, I stood really firm, like, I'm not changing. Like, this is me, this is who I am. I'm not compromising my values for you. I'm not compromising my values anymore for anybody. Take it or leave it. And it was during that, I think, when it was like, this is me, when I really got to the point of like, you can create more change by leaving this type of environment. And ultimately that's what I ended up doing. But I think I went from shame and guilt and it's all me to anger and blame. And then it was like, oh, like we both played a part. And I think we both play a part, like both sides play a part for so many of us. And that's why for me, it's so important to get everybody to recognize that.
Yeah, it's funny. What's coming up for me is like, because I partner with HR people, as you know, which are mostly women, and the challenge sometimes is not managing upwards. So like, let's say I have a leader who's also a woman who's terrible at setting boundaries, who hasn't found balance, who's on the road to burnout. Sometimes I think people feel like, well, I can't assert all these boundaries and limits when my leader doesn't. Instead of actually saying to the leader, let's both do this. Like, let's both try to like, and that's the beauty of, I think, lifting each other up, not just the people sort of below us or around us, but even above us. And I think in HR, that's like a really big skill. We've talked about this, like becoming just more empowered to even say to your CEO or to the woman above you, like, this isn't working for me, but it's definitely also not working for you. And if we do it as a team, maybe we'll actually achieve more.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a big part of it. Again, I think sometimes that is again, depending on, I suppose, where you are on that kind of burnout scale. If you are at the point of thinking this is all just me, it's unlikely that you're going to speak to those above you. I think if we can stop it getting to that point and we come right the way back to the prevention, yes, I want to be able to say to you as my boss, this is not working, right? This is how we need to, I mean, like, again, just a really simple example of conversations between you and I, right? And I don't know if any of you have found similar with some of your relationships. Laura loves a WhatsApp voice note. I hate a WhatsApp voice note and I will never do them. So Laura will leave me a voice note and I will type a response back to her because that's my preferred method of communication and Laura's is speaking. Very early on, we were able to say to each other when this was, I was like, you're never going to get a voice note off me. Like, you're literally never going to get a voice note. You can keep sending them because I know it's working for you. So even in terms of how we communicate, I think needs to be really important. And it could be like, if you're having conversations with your boss or somebody else within the business, actually, how can we best communicate? Because if I'm constantly sending you emails and you would prefer that we have a conversation, how do we find that middle ground? Exactly. And yet a lot of us don't even want to talk about how it's best to communicate. And then we wonder why we've got no boundaries. And then we wonder why the relationship's not working. And then we wonder why stress increases and anxiety increases and all of this other stuff around it. And I think it can just be as simple as, how is it best for us to speak to one another?
Right. So that we both feel balanced and at ease. I wonder how workplaces would change if we just asked each other, how do you want to feel today? And it brought like actual feelings into work, right? You want to feel calm and rested, then you could say to your boss and your peer, I know you mentioned you wanted to feel relaxed. I get the sense you're not. Let's talk about how I can help you. There was, and you guys, I've flagged like 100,000 pages in here that we could spend hours on. And I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I just wanted to say, like, the one, it's on page 165. So if you haven't gotten there yet, just flag it. But Kelly's really talking about boundaries. And I like just read this sentence so much more time that like, the more you stand in your boundaries, the more people will respect them and have a newfound respect for you for having them. They may even be inspired by you and your boundaries and ask you how you do it. And it's like, that made me so excited because it is really hard to set boundaries. And when we do it, we get better at it. It's like any other skill, I find. It really becomes easier. It's like just another part of your brain to practice. But you inspire other women to do it. And it's just such a great reminder, Kelly, that like, it's instead of just being like, it's hard for me, I don't want to do it, like just practice it. And then you teach other people to practice it. Before you know it, we're all getting better at saying, this is what I do. This is how I work. This is how I communicate. This is what's frustrating me. This is where my bias is showing up. This is where my anxiety is showing up. This is right. And then it's just like, we're all working in our own quirky styles. So thank you for that.
I think, actually this week's podcast, if anybody's interested, is all about, if you respect your boundaries, other people will too. So well picked, Laura. But I think I suppose the bit that I just want to maybe caveat, I don't think the boundaries are difficult to set.
Yeah.
I think it's the same as if we look at goal setting, right? Every single one of us on this call can set the goal. What's the difficult part is maintaining it or taking action against it.
Yeah.
So I can say, these are my boundaries, right? And I've set them and this is what they are. But if I don't maintain them, if somebody is always coming up to me like, oh, could you just do this? Or could you just do this? Or could you just do this? And I'm constantly flexing, bending, breaking, twisting, not sticking to the boundaries. That's the bit that's more important. So I think when it comes to respecting, if I say to any of you, this is my boundary, and every single one of you that comes to me that might want me to break that boundary, if all of you see me constantly breaking that boundary, guess what's going to happen? Next time you're going to expect me to break it, and next time you're going to expect me to break it, and next time you're going to expect me to break it. And I might get really pissed off with you, like, why are you not respecting my boundaries? The long and short of it is, I'm not respecting it. I've tweaked it for you. You're not going to respect it either. Whereas if I say, this is my boundary, I'm not breaking it. We could, I can't do it today, but let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it next week. Let's do it this time or this time or this time. You start to understand that that's my boundary. You start to respect that that's my boundary. You stop asking me to break my boundary. And then we start to kind of respect more about each other and understand the boundaries. So I don't think it's the setting.
It's the action.
It's the action.
Well, we were talking recently, Kelly, about how important it is to actually put it on your diary or calendar, as we call it in New York. The idea of just like haircut, yoga, meditation, lunch with a friend, and have it on there. So even if your top exec or your client or whoever is like, can you talk tomorrow at noon? The answer is really no, right? And that, I guess, is the hard part sometimes, is sticking to it, as you say, because you want to say, oh, maybe I should say yes, but probably they can just find another time, and it works for you to have that balance.
Yeah, and I think some of that again comes back to the shame thing. I think a lot of us that struggle with saying no or sticking with that boundary, a lot of us do it because we're too worried about what other people will think about us if we say no, right? Will people think I'm mean? Will people think I'm selfish? Will people think I'm not engaged? Will people think I'm I don't care enough? Will people think bad of me? Will people think blah 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 blah? Yeah. And again, I think those of us that care, right? Those of us that are caring, nurturing, supportive people of course we don't want, like, none of us do. None of us want the rest of the world to think, oh my God, like, she's a mean bitch. Like, oh, don't speak to her. Don't do this, don't do that. So we want to kind of paint this picture that we are supportive and caring and nurturing, and that comes with helping other people. But I also think if we're being too yes to other people, we are absolutely saying no to ourselves, and we're not role modeling anything to other people.
Yeah, I have that on my desk. When you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself.
Yay.
It's a really helpful, for me, it's almost daily that I have to remember that, pulled in so many directions. It's like, no. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I can tell from the chat that people have a lot to share. And so let's just open the floor, and maybe if anyone has questions they want to ask directly to Kelly, and again, all different styles you want to
do whatever you like.
Yeah.
Do whatever you like. Where are we going? There is Deborah. Hey.
Oops, I have to turn my camera on. Hi there. Now I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't read your book. I've ordered it on the call. And a lot of what you're talking about is for the individual. So what can you do to prevent burnout and such? What's your thoughts on from a leader perspective? So have you written this book to, what are your thoughts on how you can have managers become accountable? Because I bought your book because I'm sort of a bit older. I'm hopefully past the whole burnout, but I want to respected in others and understand the signs in others so that I can support them. So I'm just curious on what your thoughts are on how to overcome that. Going back to what Laura said with supporting.
There are some bits in the book about what leaders can do, and there are some bits in the book about what we can all do, and from an organization perspective. So there are some snippets in there, and I think again it comes back to that way. So I had a call with somebody this afternoon actually who has worked with a number of different universities to create I suppose you'd call it like a diagnostic tool that organizations can use, and it shows the organization how at risk the organization is of burnout, and also how much at risk every individual is. So I'm going to be doing some work with them in terms of kind of focus groups and various different bits and pieces to try and get that more widely out there, and also look at some of the solutions. I think firstly, from a leadership perspective and from an organization perspective, I speak to so many leaders, right? Could you just come and do a lunchtime talk for us? Because burnout seems to be being a big thing, right? Could you just come and do a talk for us? Some people want a 2-hour workshop. We've seen that you've done this. Could you do this for us? But the majority, I still think, and I'm sure you still find this with some of the kind of employee benefit stuff, a lot of it still feels very tick boxy. I'm doing this because burnout is an issue, and I want to show that we've ticked off the burnout box this month. So there we go with it. A lot of the times, I think when it comes to the systemic changes that are needed to prevent the burnout. So fundamentally, burnout is really, really prolonged periods of high levels of stress. That's fundamentally what it comes down to. What are we doing as leaders to reduce that stress for our people within our organizations? Have we got the right amount of people? Are we giving the right work? Are we communicating clearly? Are we giving accountability? Are we empowering our people? Have we got the right benefits? How are we working together? How does the whole structure of our organization work to say that we are doing everything we possibly can to reduce those stress levels? Some of it, of course, comes back to the individual, whether we are, how full's your stress bucket? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you looking after yourself? Are you doing all of that? So there is then a responsibility on the individual, but leaders have to acknowledge that if they are not creating stress-free or reduced stress environments for their people, burnout is going to continue. And I think, again, from a lot of organizations, the gender burnout gap has doubled since 2019. 2020 had a huge impact in terms of the numbers of cases of burnout that started to appear. I think a lot of leaders have just kind of closed the book on 2020 and says, well, now we're back to business as usual. Burnout's not really a thing, particularly in the HR space. If we just focus on kind of HR for a moment, a lot of HR professionals didn't even get to acknowledge that they were at a point that they were in a pandemic because they were too busy doing everything that they needed to do. Same for lots of other sectors. A lot of organizations are just, well, everybody's back at work now, it's fine. And it's not, because burnout is such a slow burn. It can take 2 or 3 years for the symptoms to be there. And if leaders do not recognize that we have to be doing stuff now, I really don't say this lightly, I can guarantee that burnout is going to be the next pandemic if we all do not start working collectively to do something about it. So yes, there are some bits in the book. Yeah, I mean, I've got talks, research, resources, all sorts of stuff. And again, it's that collective approach. Leaders need to say, this is what we've got to do about it. And individuals have got to say, this is what we need to do about it.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And I'm amongst friends, because I can honestly say that I know, hand on heart, I caused burnout on one of my people once. And I know 50% of the blame was me. So I'm just passionate for you to just make sure that there aren't people like me out there doing it. I wish that you were out there then so that I would know the harm that I was causing. So no,
and I want to say thank you for admitting that, because again, I think that there were definitely 5 women within the organization that I was in that absolutely contributed to that. They are never going to admit that they played any part in that. And so I think just for you to be able to say that, Deborah, I want to say thank you.
Sure. I'm glad I could, cause that problem, but yeah, okay. I'll be quiet now.
It's such a humbling reminder, Deborah, because that's what I was saying earlier of like, we don't realize our own role in it because we're not doing a great job of balancing it. So then it's like, either it's affecting the people around us. I mean, it goes back to the whole oxygen mask reference, which Kelly mentions in the book, which is so true. If you really aren't taking care of yourself, of course it'll translate to those around you. And again, no guilt or shame. We learn and we do better. But yeah, I think that's the problem I see with women in business. We sort of, instead of inspiring each other, just kind of stay in our little guarded, I'm not good at it, so you're not going to be good at it. Instead of, I want to get better at it. Can you get better at it? And it's just a more vulnerable state, which we all really can benefit from. So
thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Mandy.
Yeah. Is there any data that goes looking at any burnout, where burnout's been experienced, the damage and impact on relationships? So I'm thinking like marriage breakdowns, divorce, rifts in family. Is there anything out there that shows that it goes beyond that workplace situation, the ramifications in family? Is there any data about that?
There is, it's being finalised, but there are 3 different universities off the top of my head. There's University College London and 2 others, I think. I will need to check. Yes, there is, or there soon will be. And again, I think there's a lot more research being done about how kind of what they believe to be any kind of sort of, I can't remember the words that they use for it, but kind of any kind of wrongdoing, and how that could, like, if we've seen any kind of wrongdoing, how that might impact burnout to start in the first place. But obviously, yes, we do want to look at it. I mean, I can absolutely say, not as a result of burnout, but I burnt out in 2013. By the end of 2014, I walked away from my marriage, I'd walked away from my house, I'd walked away from everything. And I do think there is a knock-on effect. I also, and I'm very, very strong on this, I think pre-burnout, I think we also need to look and understand how other forms of burnout. So the World Health Organization still defines burnout as a workplace phenomenon.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, and I know it's not purely workplace, right? I'm seeing parents that are at a point of burnout, working and non-working parents. I'm seeing carers at a point of burnout, working and non-working carers. So I think we need to do something because it isn't just workplace. I know, and many others that I speak to know, that burnout doesn't just, and again, it's not like, oh, okay, I finished work for the day, I'm just going to switch off my burnout and I'm going to go home and carry on as normal. That's not happening. It will impact relationships. It is impacting relationships. It's impacting families. It's impacting lots of different people. I would also like to see, in terms of data, and again, I'm speaking to very different people about this, but for me, the data on burnout is still very much male, female, black, white, and other. And actually, what is happening to everybody else that doesn't fit into man, woman, black, white category? There's not enough data on any of that. Are there groups of people, individuals? Is there a cluster of us that are experiencing more than others? I want to see more of that. So yeah, as soon as I find any, Mandy, I'll share, and I'll kind of let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, that's just reminding me, you and I have talked about this. We did a bunch of podcasts, by the way, if you guys want to check our YouTubes in 2020 about a lot of these topics, and we were bored at home. But this is reminding me of like what we've talked about a lot, about who you are at work is who you are at home, and vice versa. Like, we're both coaching leaders all the time to get into therapy, not only to help them at work, but to help them at home. Because like Kelly talks a lot in the book about neuroscience, our amygdala, our, fight and flight, that's going to show up at home. It's going to show up at work. It's not like, if you have a very reactive mindset, if you're prone to high stress, obviously it's going to show up in both places. So it's really hard to compartmentalize it. And frankly, it is a good selling point to leaders when you're talking to them. Like, don't you just want to be happier overall? I find that just like diffuses everything. We're like, okay, you can be so amazing at work, but your whole life, again, back to the holistic thing that we're always talking about. So
yeah, absolutely.
So we only have 3 minutes-ish left. I just firstly want to say to everyone, thank you for ordering Kelly's book. I'm so happy to support my dear friend. Let's
Thank
send it
you.
to other people we know and keep sharing it. It comes with a great little bookmark that I told her I love that has the hashtag Mind the Gap, and you can post, and then we can all follow what everybody's learning and, you know, just keep the discussion going. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to close out with before we wrap up?
I'm just going to say it is ahead of time, like it's way ahead of time. But again, I know one of you on the call is already booked in for the slot. I think, as I said at the beginning of the call, I am really, really passionate. Like I know that we can stop this. I absolutely know that we can stop it. I know that we can prevent it. I know we need to start, you know, keep sharing the stories and do all of those sorts of things. And I had a realization a couple of weeks ago. January will be 10 years since the physical signs of burnout really took hold of me, and that kind of resulted then in like 7 months of in and out of hospital and 2 operations in 48 hours and all of the dire crap, physical crap that my burnout had on me. So I'm going to say, to kind of mark the occasion as maybe kind of as celebratory as we could be with that. But I think what I kind of came to realize, like in 10 years, I'm seeing it getting worse. I'm not seeing it getting better. I'm seeing it getting worse over a 10-year period. And so I think I'm doing it from the 9th to the 12th of January next year. I want to do a complete week's campaign called This is Burnout. I know some of you that are on the call are going to come on. I want to be doing interviews. So if you know anybody or you have experienced burnout, I want to get, you know, I'll do back-to-back interviews for 4 days. I will make sure I take the break afterwards. I'm not going to push myself to burnout to prove that burnout exists. But if you or anybody you know wants to be part of that video series, I would love it. And please do expect to see lots more posts about that. I want social media posts. I want hashtags. I want story sharing. I want as much as possible yes, Deborah, that would be awesome. Yes, please book your slot. Head to the website, book your slot. Let's have the conversation. But no, seriously, I like we've got to keep changing it. So like I said, I'm like 5 months ahead of time on that one. But I just know that's going to be like ultimately really, really important that we do. So if you know anybody or want to, that would be that. And I think, yes, please, on the book front, if you've got it, please share pictures. I'll quite happily take some awesome Amazon reviews or anything that you can do. But again, for me, like I just want to be sharing the story as much as we can do, because I know that we can stop it getting certainly to the point that I did. And I don't know if I put it in the book, but I genuinely believe that I went through it as badly as I did so that I can try and stop anybody else having to experience it as badly as I did. So yes, please, if you haven't bought it, please buy it. If you have bought it, please share pictures and reviews and all of that lovely stuff. And I will love you all forever. Thank you.
Thank you all. This was a really comforting discussion. Super proud of Kelly, and let's all just keep finding ways to help each other, as we keep saying, collectively.
Collectively. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Yeah, I love all of you. Laura, thank you for being, I see Laura's questions are always just like, she's just like, I love how she gets them. So thank you for being my question queen. Thank you everybody for joining. I love you all, and yes, cheers.
Thank you, Kelly.
A little book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Have a fab rest of the evening, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Love you.
Take care. Get well soon.
Thank you. I'm going to bed now.
Yeah, do. Take care. Bye, 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 bye. Bye, bye, bye. Thanks, my lovely.